Hello children, today I am going to take the lesson number 3 from your English supplementary reader. So the name of the lesson is The Selfish Giant, and this lesson is a story which was written by Oscar Wilde. Now here, as the name suggests, it is about the story of a giant. Now what is a giant? A very huge, tall man, right? And what is the meaning of selfish? A selfish is a kind of an adjective which is given to a person who does not like to share his things with others, right? So here is the story. Let's get into the story. Now, as I have turned the page, now you come to the author, right? So who's the author? As you all can see in this picture, towards your right hand side, is the picture of the author Oscar Wilde. His full name is Oscar Fingal O'Flaherty Wills Wilde, and he was an Irish poet and playwright. Playwright, a person who writes plays, stories, dramas, right? So he was an Irish poet, and he lived in London, and it was in London that he had got so much of fame. His most famous stories include Happy Prince. Children, I should suggest you to read Happy Prince. It's a wonderful story. And apart from that, he has written The Nightingale and the Rose, The Model Millionaire, and of course, The Selfish Giant. These are a few very famous stories. And in each of his stories, he has a moral for us all to learn. So now, let's get into the story. As you all can see, in this picture, you see children playing out in this garden. Now, this garden belonged to the giant, right? And the giant's name is not mentioned in the lesson, but not only was the giant owner of this garden, but he was also the owner of a big bungalow. So when he is not in his garden, he will be in his bungalow. And his bungalow was the most beautiful bungalow, and his garden was the most beautiful garden. It was said that in his garden were the most beautiful fragrant flowers, and there were juicy fruits which hung from all the trees. Then there were beautiful slides and swings, and children loved to roll on the velvety grass. In short, if you have to describe about the giant's garden, one can easily say that it was the paradise on the earth. So every afternoon, while returning from school, children knew that in the afternoon, the giant will not be in his garden, he will be in his bungalow. So every afternoon, while returning from the school, children will come into the giant's garden, and they would play. They would have a lovely time in the garden. Now, let's move on to the next page. As you all can see in this page, children are having a good time in the giant's garden. Now, how come they are having a good time here? The thing is that the giant whose bungalow you can see at the back, and you can see the garden in front of the bungalow. So the giant has locked his bungalow, and he has gone to visit his friend. Now he got an invitation from his friend who lives in United Kingdom, and his name is Cornish Ogre. Ogre is also another word for giant. So that giant called this giant to his home, and immediately, in order to live with his friend, this giant leaves his bungalow, packs up his things, leaves his bungalow, and goes to live with his friend, the Cornish Ogre. And he lives with him for 7 long years. During this time, children would come in the morning and in the afternoon and in the evening. See, you can see some children saying, one of the child is saying, I will come here every day. Another boy says, we can play here as long as the giant is away from here. If he comes, then he will throw us out of here. So somewhere the children had the fear of the giant. So they would come in the garden only in his absence. Here the children love to be in the garden, and he says, I love this garden. I wish to come here every day. So these were the feelings of the children. Let's move on to our next page. As you all can see in this chart, again we find children playing and having all sorts of games, everything. As the children played there, prayed there, they did not want that the giant should come back from his friend's house. So they always prayed that the giant should live in his friend's house even for some more days. But one cannot be a guest of someone for longer days, right? So the giant had to come. In the meantime, children felt that they are the most happy people on earth because they are getting to enjoy one of the wonderful creations of God. One of the most beautiful garden in their city. They are enjoying and they are getting to play over there. Let's move on to our next page. So after 7 long years, the giant comes to his garden and is shocked to see so many children playing over there. Out of anger, he shouts, "Get out of my lovely garden! How dare you all enter my garden in my absence?" He was furious, red with anger. All of a sudden, children shouted, screamed, cried, and ran in all directions. They did not want to do they did not know what to do. So they ran in all directions. So because they were shocked, they knew if the giant is angry, maybe he may pick up 1 or 2 children and eat them raw. So they were all afraid and they started running in all the directions. As soon as the children were out of the garden, giant takes up some bricks and starts building a fence around his garden. Right? Now you can see this in your next page. What does the giant do? Let's see in the next page. As soon as the children were out of the garden, the giant builds a long and huge wall all around the garden. And he says, "I will allow no one to play in my garden. My garden is for me alone." See, children, these were the words of the giant. And he also hung up a board on the wall. And this board read, "Trespassers will be prosecuted." That is, trespassers means those who come in the garden without the giant's permission, they will be killed. They will be cut into pieces. And children, when they read, they were all so afraid of that they promised one another they are never ever going to come into the giant's garden. Now let's see what happens next. Now as the children were out of the garden, they became very sorrowful. They were very sorrowful because now they did not have the lovely garden. They missed the lovely bird song, the velvety grass, the fragrant flowers, the juicy fruits. They've missed everything. So children keep on. Now they had the dusty streets and road, and they did not want to play over there. So with a sorrowful heart, they are again thinking of the garden. And they are saying, how happy we were in the giant garden. But now it is so irritating to play in this dusty and muddy streets. Seeing the children so sad, the nature, that is God's creation, nature also thought of punishing the giant for being so selfish. How did it punish? Let's see in the next page. So here is your next page. Yeah. So the time it happened that as the seasons passes, so there came the winter season, but after winter season, there was spring and summer in all the other gardens. Those houses who were in the neighboring houses of the giant, they all had spring season and summer season, and there were juicy fruits, and birds would come and sing over those trees. But birds refused to come to the giant's garden. the spring season, the summer season, the autumn season, they just refused to enter into the giant's garden because giant was selfish. He was not ready to share his gifts with others. So they thought of teaching the giant a lesson. So here is a literary device, that is, here we see that non-living things like seasons, they are just they are personified as people, right? They are thought of as a people, and they are given, they're called by some names, that is the name of the season, and they are taken as to be people who are not willing to come to the giant's garden. So spring and summer and autumn, they decided, the three of them decided that they are not going to enter into giant's house. Now you all know in spring season new leaves grow up, in summer season there are new flowers in all the trees and plants, and in autumn season there are certain fruits which grow in the autumn season alone. So these three seasons they did not like to enter into giant's garden. So the giant's garden was covered with hail and snow, and north wind rode over there. So these are the signs which show that the giant was punished by the nature. So let's now come to the next slide. Here in the slide, the giant looks out of the castle's window, his bungalow's window, and he is wondering why everywhere there is greenery, but my garden alone is covered with snow and frost. Why doesn't the spring come to my garden? He was very disheartened because he knew his garden was the most beautiful garden, but now the same garden was now covered with a thick sheet of ice. So winter, hail, frost, north wind, they all started dancing, and they started dancing over the roof of the bungalow. They started covering everything, and every grass, every leaf was covered with snow, so that not even a single green leaf appeared. Everything was covered with snow. Only snow and frost were having their time in the giant's garden. It was just the result of the selfishness of the giant. Now let's move on to our next picture. So here, as you all can see, everything is covered. The spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruit to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. Autumn, see what does autumn say about the giant? He is too selfish, she said. Who? The autumn says. And so it was winter there. Do you know, children? Winter is the season which giant hates the most, because to him winter is a symbol of sorrowfulness, sadness, because at that time only the beauty of the garden is lost. So he never liked winter. But now, just because he was so selfish, winter, north wind, hail, frost, they all came and they made a very dirty condition of the giant's garden. Snow danced and frost hailed and north wind blew, and everything was upside down. The garden had lost its beauty. The bungalow had lost its beauty. Now let's come on to the next page. Here every day the giant will come and he will see. Can you see the spring season, the autumn season? See, the north wind is blowing air, how it is, how it looks like, right? So these are the four people who are enjoying. They are wanting to destroy everything that was beautiful, because they all wanted to punish the giant. The giant comes and he says, I hope there will be a change in the weather. All the other gardens were having trees laden with fruits and flowers. The plants were all covered with beautiful flowers. Only giant's garden was not covered with flowers, or the trees were not having fruits. Let's come on to the next page. So here in this next page, as you all can see, the giant is very ill. He is sick. He is sick of seeing the winter season in his garden. So he lies down on his bed thinking what is going to happen to his garden and what is going to happen to his bungalow. He cannot bear it, so he falls sick and he was lying on his bed. Suddenly, he hears a lovely music coming out of his window. Let's see into the next page. Who is this person singing the lovely song? Yeah. Can you see? The giant is happy. He's happy to see a lovely bird. Can you see the blue color bird there? It's a linnet. Yeah, it's a linnet. This little bird was singing and giant feels now he's okay. He's back to his healthy nature. He's back to his good health. And he comes out to see why the linnet is singing. It's been so many months since he had heard the bird song. So he thinks, at last, I think the spring has come. But what made spring season to come to my garden? So he sees there in his garden, there was this wall which he had constructed. There's a big hole in the wall. And through the wall, children had started coming in. As you all can see in the next page, children had come through the hole. Can you see a small hole and a child entering the garden? Yeah. So through a small hole, all the children came into the garden, and every branch there was a child, and everybody started enjoying, having a good time again in the garden. So the giant realized that children were the one who could bring happiness in his garden. With the coming of the children, the spring and the summer season had also come, and there were flowers and fruits everywhere. It was back to normal. Now, let's come to another scene of the story. But there was a particular place in the giant's garden. It had only winter at that time, and all the other places were covered with green grasses and beautiful flowers on plants, but that particular corner alone had winter. He did not know what was happening over there. Suddenly he notices a little boy, a beautiful, handsome little boy was standing over there, and he was wanting to reach to one of the branches of the tree. But he was not able to climb on the branch, so he cries bitterly. Giant comes into the garden. As soon as the other children see the giant coming in the garden, they all run away. They think now also the giant is going to come and throw them out. But giant did not say anything. Slowly he comes to the small boy. He lifts the boy in his hand and helps him to sit on the tree where he wanted. Immediately, the tree is also covered with green leaves and beautiful flowers and juicy fruits. So the giant says, "How selfish I have been! Now I know why the spring would not come here." So he lifts up the boy, helps him to go back to the branch, and he sees with the coming of the boy on the branch, the spring has also come. And the giant was happily playing with the child, with that little boy. When the other children notice that the giant is playing with the little boy, they also come back into the garden. As you all can see in the next page, see, all the other children have come and everybody is playing. So the giant says, and he decides, my dear children, my garden and my bungalow is for you. You all can come here every day and you don't have to be afraid of anyone. Enjoy. This is your garden. This is your bungalow. And he also starts playing with the children. So every day from then on, the children would come and they would play. But every day the giant missed one particular boy. That little boy whom he had helped to climb on one of the trees, he did not come after that day. So every day he longed to see that boy, see that lovely boy again in his garden. One day he asked the other children about the boy whom he had helped. but they also told that they hadn't seen that boy after that day. They had seen him only on that day, and after that day they could not see this boy. So children were having a good time, giant was having a good time, and everyone who would pass by that way, they would be amazed how giant is enjoying, how giant has changed himself, how he is enjoying so good time with the lovely children. Years passed by. Now let's go on to the next page. Years passed by, the giant has become very old. Can you see, children? Now the giant is sitting on a armchair. He doesn't have that much of energy to play with the children. So he would sit in one corner of the garden and he would see the other children playing and chatting, and he would love to see them playing. But still he hoped for that little boy to come again. So as the days were passing by, the giant becomes old, weak, and as we come into the next page, we will see a beautiful scene. Now here, as you can see, this is a view which the giant noticed from his window. So this is a particular view which the giant sees from his window. As one day he was getting ready to come into the garden, he sees that one particular corner, where he had seen that boy whom he had helped to climb the tree, that particular corner had a beautiful tree which was covered with white flowers, and the tree had golden branches and silver color fruits hung from it. It was really amazing, and he was surprised to see the same little boy sitting in one of the branches. Happily, the giant runs out of his house, runs out of his bungalow to come and see the boy. Let's see the next page. So the boy is happy, and the giant is also happy to see him. But all of a sudden, he notices the palms of the boy. The palms, your hand, right? And he sees that the boy's palms have got nail marks. Somebody has nailed the boy, not only on his palms, but also in his feet. In the boy's feet also, he can see the mark of nail, as if somebody had nailed his palms and his feet. The giant was red with anger, and he asked the little boy, my dear boy, tell me who has wounded you. I will take out my big sword and I will slay them. I will cut them to pieces, those who have given you these marks on your hand. Believe me, children, it was Lord Jesus Christ who had taken the form of the little child, because in Jesus' hand there were the marks of the nail. But Lord Jesus replies, these are the wounds of love, the love which he showed for his people. He wanted everyone to experience the love of God. The love of God is for everyone. So we should not be selfish with anyone. So baby Jesus, Lord Jesus, who had come in the form of the little boy, he says to the giant, my dear giant, once you welcome me in your garden, now it is time for me to welcome you in my garden, which is heaven, the paradise. Saying this, Lord Jesus asks giant to hold his hand. As soon as the giant holds the hand of Lord Jesus, his body falls back on the ground. In the next page, you can see the giant's body has fallen down onto the ground, and his body is covered with the white flowers. Both Jesus and the soul of the giant, they go into the heaven. This was the reward for being unselfish. Children, this story gives up the message that as long as you are selfish, you will not be able to enjoy God's goodness, God's graces, God's blessings. When you give up your selfishness, you will be able to enjoy God's blessing. So this is the moral which Oscar Wilde tries to give up. Being selfish is not going to help you get anything. Only when you become kind with others, you experience more and more of blessings in your life. To get blessings, be good, be kind to everyone. Stop being selfish, because selfishness will give you only loneliness and curses from others. Every kind person has a reward. So that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. With this, I conclude the lesson.